Hello everybody, and welcome. My name is Ariane, and I'm a professional astrologer, and you are on my channel, Neptune and Serenity. And today we're doing a very special video I've been thinking about doing for some time now, maybe like 2 months or something, and I don't know why I never got around to doing it. But we are taking a look at Marilyn Monroe's natal chart, at her astrology birth chart. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at why she captivated everyone. Where do you see that in her birth chart? Why is that? Where are some hints of that? And what does that mean for her personally? So we're going to start with that, and then we'll also just read some other parts of her chart afterwards as well, kind of do a little bit of a deep dive. I don't know how long I'll feel guided to kind of analyze and where I'm gonna feel like, okay, I'm ready to stop now. But yeah, there's not that much to say for this intro. Um, yeah, I on this channel now, I want to keep doing videos a bit more like this. In the past, I was doing a lot of tarot readings. Now I've transferred those to my new podcast, which is also Neptunian Serenity. Link in the description if you're interested. But on this channel, I'm more interested in doing natal chart readings now, focus more on astrology, because I'm an astrologer and a tarot reader, but on my platforms up until now, I've been posting more about tarot because I think I hadn't really figured out which format I like the best when it comes to talking about astrology. And I kind of realized, like, for me, I really like, whenever I talk about astrology or a birth chart in particular, I really just like to dive deep into it. So any kind of little reel or TikToks or even like carousel posts on Instagram, I just always felt like I wanted to say more. So then I just felt like, okay, longer type YouTube videos are going to be what's it for me. And yes, I want to keep doing these kinds of readings of historical figures and celebrities and personalities with their natal charts. So if you have any requests, feel free to leave them down below. If I feel inspired to do them, I might as well do so. And I will prioritize people who have passed on because I just feel more comfortable than talking about people who are still alive, right? Um, but yeah, so let's get into it right away. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see her chart. There you go. Can I get into full screen? Okay, great. So here's her chart, okay? So she was born on June 1st, 1926 at 9:30 a.m. in Los Angeles, California, USA. So this is the chart that we have for her here. If you just wanted to start by looking at her big three, she's a Gemini sun, Aquarius moon, and a Leo rising, as you can see here. So as I said, we're going to start with just answering the question of the title of the video, right? Why she captivated everyone. So we're going to start with that. And then afterwards, I think I'll probably just kind of do a general reading of what I find interesting, what I feel called to talk about when it comes to her chart. But her chart is definitely very cool and very interesting. And the coolest thing about astrology is that, like, there are some things that we're only talking about more recently about her, like that we didn't really talk about when she was still alive. Like, for example, a lot of people have been saying that, like, we've been talking a lot about the fact that, oh, she was really smart, she just didn't necessarily talk about it because she knew that wasn't necessarily what was the most valued thing about her, etc., or because we had that misogynistic perspective that if she was gorgeous and pretty, then she couldn't be smart as well. But that is, like, the thing. If you had looked at her birth chart, you would see right away that, of course, like, she was smart. There were many big signs of intelligence. If you see that Sun conjunct Mercury in Gemini here, like, you wouldn't, if you had just looked at her chart, you wouldn't have thought that she was not intelligent, or that was just one example. So to start, let's just look at her first house here, okay? Because that is where we are really going to focus our attention for answering the question of today's video, why she captivated everybody. So the first house starts off with the ascendant here, right? The AC that you see right here, and the big line. The ascendant is an angle that marks the starting point of the first house in a birth chart, in case you didn't know. And she has hers at 13 degrees of Leo. And then if you can see, she has, this is the asteroid Lilith right here, which is just a little bit before that, right? It's at 12 degrees 50 minutes. And so it's still technically in the 12th house, but it is making a conjunction with the ascendant. And of course, I'm going to go into details about what that means. Um, yeah, so Lilith conjunct the ascendant. And for those of you who know astrology quite well, yes, I'm using true Lilith instead of Black Moon Lilith or Mean Lilith, because when I work with Lilith, I often like to use true Lilith for that placement, but her Mean Lilith is also in Leo, but at the 29th degree. Okay, disclaimer for the people who are wondering. And then also in her first house, you have here Neptune. Okay, Neptune at 22 degrees of Leo in the first house. And that is definitely, like that is even already someone with a Leo rising, when you first meet them, like they leave a strong impression typically. Because the first house in the ascendant, in case you don't know, uh, is amongst many other things, the first impression that we make uh, when we meet somebody new. It is kind of the energy that we lead with when we meet someone new, when we go out into the world, because obviously we're all very multi-layered, but it is typically the first energy, the first part of our personality that we put out there or that shows through when we meet someone new. So it's the first thing that people kind of notice about us. And Leo is a sign that shine, right? It's a sign, it's a fire sign. So already people with fire risings in general do tend to leave a big impression, or the other fire signs being Sagittarius and Aries, people with fire risings, in different ways, of course, in their own personal ways. When you meet them, typically it's not the type of person that you're like, if you meet them in a group, you're like, oh, I didn't remember this person. you know, they don't necessarily tend to come across as like quiet and shy and reserved. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're like loud and really intense either. That really depends. Um, but yeah, you definitely notice them. Leo risings typically, when they walk into your room, all eyes on them, because they carry with them that Solarian energy, right? Leo is ruled by the sun. And so when a Leo rising walks into a room, it's as if the sun walks into a room. Listen, I know there's a lot of people, even who study astrology, who are kind of like, oh, that's very stereotypical of Leo, but it's true. It is true. Okay. Yeah, Leo is a sign that wants to be seen as well. So Leo risings are people with prominent Leo placements, unless there's something else going on in the chart, typically don't mind having a lot of eyes on them. So I think even before she like became really famous, I think that was a thing that she was used to, just people really staring at her, or really noticing her presence a lot, because we see that in her natal chart. And our birth charts in astrology, we have them, are set in stone, and their effect on us is not set in stone, but the actual placements are set in stone and they work for our entire life. So this wasn't something that just started happening when she got famous. Obviously more people knew her then, and it probably happened with more people or with more intensity. That was already there. Okay. um and the thing about, both Lilith and Neptune on their own would be an interesting thing to see in her chart, but the fact that she has both of them here, how do I say this? It's like when you meet her, she comes across like a fantasy. She comes across like she's out of like a fantasy land, and you didn't think that that type of woman or that type of human could really exist. She definitely like has that aura within her. Okay, there's something with Neptune, there's something ethereal about her, there's something just, people who have Neptune in the first house or conjunct the ascendant, they intrigue people a lot because they have that like kind of magical, ethereal, flowy energy about them. At the same time, it's hard to pinpoint who they really are. So that's the thing, is that she attracted the eyes and the attention and captivated so many people, but it's really not everybody, if anyone, who really could, upon first impression at least, who could really see through like that first impression, that first like appearance, maybe mask, if we want to say it like that, and be like, oh, okay, like she gives all that impression, but I can say that like this is specifically seems to be who she really is, or seems to be authentic to who she really is. It took time to get to know her personally. Um, yeah, and the thing about Neptune, people who have Neptune in the first house, or conjunct the ascendant, if it's in the 12th house or something, hers is not conjunct the ascendant because it's kind of too many degrees away, right? The ascendant is at 13 degrees and her Neptune is at 22 degrees, but it's still in the first house, so it's still very much here, still very much something that you see right away when you meet her. Neptune gives you that chameleon archetype, right? The animal that changes colors. Well, it does many other things, but people with Neptune in the first house, they're really capable of adapting to any different kind of situation. They have many different sides of their personality, um, and they're really able to feel out when and where they should, like how they should act based on the different situation and who they're around. They're really able to feel out a room and show up in a way that's like suits that specific situation, which is also why it's hard to really tell who they really are, because it's like, oh, like when I see you with these people, you're like this. When I see you with these people, you're like this. When I see you with these people, you're like this. And it's not necessarily that they're fake. Like anyone can be fake, sure, but not necessarily. They just have that ability. And this is why people who have a very strong and prominent Neptune in their natal chart tend to be really great actors, because they are fully able to just like wipe away their own ego and their own personal identity and like wear a different one for that day. It's like they can, if they want to, they can kind of put on different personas, just like they change outfits, essentially. And that's what she was able to do. So that's also why she was so successful and so talented at her work, because like she could always put herself in a different character. Yeah, you see that a lot with actors, people with strong Neptune in the first, Neptune in the 10th house or conjunct the midheaven, Neptune in aspect to the sun, Neptune in aspect to Mars. People with Pisces midheaven, you see that a lot. Or Pisces placements, like Pisces moon, especially. All of those I just named. With Lilith, however, so, with the Neptune in the first house, you can have this kind of fantasy. And oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to say about that is that with that chameleon energy, you can kind of adapt to anything, which also means that everyone who meets you can find something within you that they like or that they can relate to. And whether that is something that is truly who you are or not, we don't necessarily know. They don't necessarily know. But that is also the reason why people with a strong Neptune placement can be very famous and very loved, because everyone can see a part of themselves in them, every single different human being, or they can relate to something, or they can find something that they like. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that so strange, right? But yeah, that's exactly it. And Neptune here, so we have the energy of Neptune, which I've been talking about, and then the energy of Leo, which I talked about earlier. And then put those two together, because Neptune's in Leo and then ascendant in Leo. So it's like I am the sun, I walk into a room, I'm the sun, I'm here, I shine, I attract your attention, you see me, but also you don't really see me. Or you see what you want to see. That's kind of the energy. But then with Lilith here, Lilith is just a very, very fascinating asteroid and thing to work with in astrology. I absolutely love the story and the archetype and studying it in natal charts, and I'm not at all surprised to see her right here on the ascendant. Okay, so with that Neptune energy, as I said, people with those kinds of placements can easily be very loved by many people. But with Lilith, there's also this energy of like, how do I say this? The thing is, people with Lilith placements will show up with qualities or a certain energy about them that other people tend to repress or not accept within themselves. And therefore, when you see that person embodying that energy so shamelessly, or at least that's how you see it, it can feel very confronting, and you can want to, as a reaction, reject them or tell them that what they're doing is not okay, who they are is not okay, and shame them, essentially. Because if you the story of Lilith, in case you don't know, she's more present in Judaism. The story of Lilith is that she was Adam's first wife. She was created by God at the same time as Adam from the same clay, I believe, but in the Garden of Eden. But then she didn't want to submit to Adam because she was like, I'm equal to you. And therefore, she was banished from the Garden of Eden. And then afterwards, God created Eve for Adam instead of just to be a person. So, um, and then afterwards, I think Lilith was like treated or made into it like a demon or something. And so if you're looking at modern feminism, of course, if you take that into account, many feminist movements have reclaimed her and used her imagery and her archetype to talk about their movement and the things that they were advocating for. Because essentially, when you think about that story, it's essentially a woman who just wanted to be herself, who wanted to be treated equally, who didn't want to hide parts of herself that a man would find unacceptable, and then because of that, she was shamed, she was banished, right? She was punished. That's the thing. And we see some of that as well when we look at the natal charts, and Lilith in the natal chart, right? It's an asteroid, as I said, um, because people with strong Lilith placement, especially here on the ascendant, people with Lilith on the ascendant, just them existing, sometimes they don't even know that, they don't even think about that, but just by them showing up somewhere, what people see is like a form of wildness and authenticity that society doesn't want to accept. But at the same time, it's like that energy, that archetype of, the wild feminine and wild female sexuality that is uninhibited, which is both something that is absolutely craved and fascinating society, and also something that is very punished and rejected for that very same reason. It's all very messed up, right? I think that we're all aware of that, but people with Lilith placement like Marilyn Monroe here, like especially in a place like this, they are always living out this archetype. So unfortunately, she probably experienced a lot of things in her life where she was just shows up somewhere, doesn't think that maybe doesn't do anything, or doesn't think that she's doing anything weird or different or wrong, and then people just chastising her or just rejecting her, being like, you're too much, or you're taking up too much space, you're too extra, you're too beautiful, you're too hot, you're too sexy, you're too sexual, that kind of thing, when she was like, I'm not even doing anything. But unfortunately, that's just kind of like the energy that you project when you have that little placement here. And what is important about for herself, right? Like having that Lilith placement, or if you're someone watching and you have also Lilith on your ascendant, it's because the Lilith journey essentially is about liberating yourself. Because if you are also ashamed of these things, if you also think I'm too much, I'm taking up too much space, uh, then a lot of people will also affirm that within you and continue rejecting you. If you start healing those parts of you that have been pushed on because of the patriarchy, and just embodying them shamelessly, liberating yourself, even though it seems contradictory, but that's actually easier for you. You get less rejected, or when you do, it doesn't feel as personal, it doesn't hurt as much. So it was a very important part of her path, of her journey, of her life, to just shamelessly show up as she is in all of her beauty and all of the way that she shines, and accept that, like, yes, okay, like I'm here. I want to be seen. I am beautiful. I am sexy. Um, and I'm okay with that. And I want to show that. That was an important part of her path. But for some people, she was always going to be too much. For some people, she was always going to be something that needs to be rejected or punished. But the people who think she should be rejected or punished, or that she was too much, was because they also had that thought, like, within themselves, I am too much as well. I hope that makes sense. Um, yeah, but as I said, like, people with like Lilith also in the natal chart is also like where we are so captivating and we fascinate, because like there's still this, like, people are obsessed and so fascinated with that wild feminine energy, because deep down, the same people who reject that and want to shame that and repress that are people who absolutely love it, but they don't want to admit to themselves that they love it. That's like real life. It's like, I'm going to make you feel small, tell you you're too much, you're shining too much, because I'm actually captivated by you, and that makes me insecure. That's essentially what's going on here. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to like close some of my curtains because it's dark outside now. Yeah, so that is the gist of that particular question, why she captivated everyone. Of course, like, you can link it to some other placements as well, but that's really what I wanted to talk about here. Yeah, so let's talk about some other things about her. So we talked about her ascendant and all that kind of stuff. Ascendant's also like how we, not only that, but like it's not the only part of our chart that we feel it, it's how we like see ourselves as well. Typically how we identify ourselves to be something that's very, it's something about ourselves that is very conscious to us. Let's just say it like that, okay? Um, and then I'm interested here in talking about her moon Jupiter conjunction right here. Okay, well, it's a very wide conjunction, sure. I personally, different astrologers will have different orbs that they accept, or that they, that they work with when it comes to conjunctions, especially like with the moon. Like, come on. When it comes to conjunctions, I'm ready to go up to like 10 degrees, which I know is kind of like a lot of people don't go as wide. I do. Obviously, if like I will not necessarily address a conjunction that is super wide as in depth or as quickly as a tighter conjunction when I read the natal chart of somebody, but I will take this into account, like a conjunction moon Jupiter, even though they're like 7 degrees away. Okay, thank you. End of discussion. Ah, so we have moon and Jupiter right here. So this is a really nice conjunction. Okay, moon and Jupiter is a very nice conjunction. I think that she definitely got along very well with women. Like, first of all, I think that she probably had a lot of female friends. She really felt comfortable with people who were feminine, but at the same time, who were feminine in their own personal way, and not just feminine in the way that they were taught and told to be feminine, because we have Aquarius here, which is about individuality and our own uniqueness, right? Um, there's also, here we also see that she could have learned a lot from other women in her lifetime, learned a lot from other women, or a lot of her teachers, not necessarily in a literal way like at school, but just the people in her life who played that kind of role. Um, could have been women or people who were more feminine, or people who kind of taught her about like what it means, like, how do I word this? That like you should reclaim what it means for you to be a woman, more in that sense, right? Um, Moon in the seventh house and then Jupiter in the seventh house, also placements that show that she had the opportunities to meet a lot of people and form a lot of acquaintances, friendships, and relationships. Okay, like wherever Jupiter is in the natal chart is a sign of abundance. So in the seventh house is about or relationships, amongst other things. So having an abundance of relationships, that doesn't necessarily mean having had a lot of romantic partners. I'm just saying abundance of relationships. So she met a lot of people, she connected with a lot of people. But yes, of course, that can be also like a lot of different romantic relationships. Do we know that? I mean, we know some of her relationships. Uh, I admit, like, I forgot to mention at the beginning, like, I am not like an expert on Marilyn Monroe. I haven't done like a lot of extensive research on her. I don't know her life that much. So there may be things that I say here that like are things that we know about or that she has said that I don't necessarily know. Just disclaimer right quickly here. Um, yeah, abundance of relationships. And then this is also like Jupiter is also where, because it's the archetype of the teacher, it is, and also speaks of wisdom. Her relationships was where the area of her life where she learned the most from. Okay. So whether or not she had a lot of relationships was not necessarily an issue. I mean, I think in general it's not really an issue, but sometimes when it comes to romantic relationships, we have that like cultural belief that like having one relationship that lasts a long time is inherently better or healthier than having multiple ones that are shorter, which is not necessarily true. But you know, um, yeah, connecting emotionally with the people that she met, and you know, people with people who are Leo risings and therefore have automatically the Aquarius descendants, because you see here on the one side we have the big uh black line with AC, which I mentioned at the beginning, right? Which is the angle of the starting point of the first house, but this is actually an axis. There's two different angles at each end. On one end, we have the ascendant. On the other hand, we have the descendant, okay? And that is the angle starting out of the seventh house. So she would have attracted Aquarius type of people, just people who are very connected to the collective, people who care a lot about humanitarian things, people who are very unique, maybe not necessarily conventionally beautiful or just conventional in general, right? Conventionally, people who are not like everybody else, because she met a lot of different kinds of people. She met lots of different kinds of people. I think she's the type of person who could have gotten along with like anybody, not just because of her like Neptune in the first house that she's able to kind of like adapt to a situation, but also she's capable of connecting emotionally and seeing somebody beyond just like their facade or like the cultural judgment that most people would push onto them. So she could have had many friends or many friendly acquaintances with many different kinds of people that we wouldn't necessarily expect her to get along with based on like who she was and what kind of archetype or role she was playing in our society, right? Yeah. At the same time, because we have Jupiter here, well, and the moon as well, because we have both of these in making an opposition to Neptune in the first house, right? You see those red lines in between them. We see it that there could have been conflict here. Okay, the opposition is a challenging aspect in astrology. So there could have been a challenge here because she liked connecting with people a lot. She liked learning from people and from her relationships a lot. But she couldn't have this issue where she never felt fully seen in her relationships, or she felt like, or you know the phrase like, you like the idea of me, you don't like me, or you love the idea of me, you don't love me. She could have felt like that a lot in her relationships, all kinds of relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, etc. Because she knew, or at least she could see her effects on other people, that she had that chameleon effect. And this is really just a challenge to find people who can really see you and also just see yourself. Because that's the thing with Neptune in the first house, you can even have that kind of confusion yourself of like, I can be so many different things. Who am I really when I'm not reflecting somebody else? That is kind of the lesson and the wisdom that you find in these kinds of placements here. Yeah. Okay, I said what I wanted to say about that. Um, we definitely see here, you know, in her eighth house, the Mars and Uranus in Pisces is definitely where we see the substance abuse issues, right? Just taking a lot of substances in general. Um, Pisces rules in in astrology rules and Neptune, but we're not talking about Neptune and her chart anymore. Pisces rules addictions. And Pisces is always about escapism because that's what every single addiction is about, escaping the present moment. right? Escaping your current emotions, how you currently feel, to have that kind of relief, or that kind of like something that either makes you feel better or something that numbs you out, something that just takes you at a to a different place, so that you don't have to be present, even though we are meant to be present in this life, right? Which is why addictions and substance abuse always ends up being a problem. Um, and the eighth house also rules death. So sometimes, not always, please take that with a grain of salt, because people sometimes the placement we have in our eighth house will kind of give us an insight on how we might die. Okay. Again, I'm only feeling comfortable saying this because she has passed on. Okay, don't like go around and look at people's eighth house and be like, you're gonna die like this. Like, please. Ethics is important in astrology, okay? Um, but we do see that here. And Mars is the planet of willpower, the planet of taking action here. Uranus can be a very extreme planet, especially it's at the anaretic degree of time, right? 29 degrees here. We do see that like she would go out of, like, if she wanted substances, she would go out of her way to take them, to get them. And with Uranus, it could have been like sometimes she didn't take any for a long time, then suddenly she would take a lot, right? Like that kind of extreme. And you do, with Mars and Uranus, you do see potential accidents. So, um, but what I want to say about that, and those placements are also a sign of strong sexuality, okay? So yes, it's not just the image that she was projecting. She probably definitely uh feels weird to say both of those words right together, probably indefinitely, different meanings. Um, she most likely did have a strong sex drive, and some people, Uranus also rules kind of weird stuff, or things that most people consider weird. She might have had um, preferences or fantasies that were more unconventional. But with the Pisces here, Pisces is also about fantasies. So it is possible that she had a lot of them without necessarily living them out, or without necessarily telling anybody about it. That is possible as well. Um, so she was able to lose herself in that kind of energy, whether that was sexuality or substances, or the occult, but I don't know if she was into anything like that. I'm not aware of it. What I want to say though is that, we have this water grand trine in her natal chart, okay? We have the Mars in Pisces here at 20 degrees in the eighth house. Then we have Saturn in Scorpio in the fourth house here at 21 degrees. And we have here Pluto in Cancer at 13 degrees in, oh, it's very much on the edge, right? 11th or 12th house. Hold on. In the 11th house. Okay, almost in the 12th house, but it is in the 11th house. Okay. So you see that big blue rectangle in her chart. That is what we call a grand trine. And it really shows us a specific um, emphasis and also mastery of one element in the natal chart here, water. Okay, so she was potentially very aware of her own emotions. She was probably like, it was something that was very important to her, that she thought about a lot. Okay, it was a big part of her life, how she felt about things, and not just her own emotions, but just her intuition as well, which she picked up on that wasn't necessarily said or shown, that kind of thing. But what I want to say with this is that when I was looking at this chart, with the Saturn here in the fourth house in Scorpio, this is a difficult placement. Well, Saturn always, as a planet, is challenging inherently. So wherever we have it is not necessarily some place where an area of our life where we're going to have it easy. The fourth house speaks of our origins or ancestry or childhood home or childhood in general, or parents, or family, those kinds of things. Okay, so those were the things that were especially challenging to her, and at the same time, it was like her biggest lesson in life that she was meant to learn, which was to nurture herself and a family. It doesn't have to be hers biologically, it could be just like a chosen family. But having that tight circle of people who really care for you and who really see you. And yeah, and also just like having a home, right? Like making a house go into a home, that kind of thing. Having that like space that is like your safe space, your inner cocoon, both like internally, intangibly, and also like literally like your home. Um, Scorpio here can be a sign where we see violence, okay? And with Saturn being here, Saturn also represents authority figures in our lives, and also like archetype of the father, or a male who, or not necessarily always a male, but most of the time a male who would have played some kind of father figure kind of role in our lives in early childhood here in her life. So I don't know if we know that, but her father could have been abusive or violent potentially. Um, and I'm not sure, we have Saturn here, sorry, making a square to the moon, and the moon represents the mother as well. So there could have been violence between the two parents. There could have been violence from a parent to her as well, even if it's not directly to you, if you witness it to somebody else, that is violent in itself and traumatizing in itself. But there's just can be a lot of childhood trauma with this kind of placement, like Saturn retrograde in Scorpio in the fourth house, and then with the square to both Neptune and the moon here. It is a direct, whatever happened in her childhood was directly impacting the issue that we talked about earlier about her connecting with a lot of people but not really feeling seen, because she felt like she needed to put on this mask or place in a role to be safe. Um, and with the trine, yeah, exactly, especially with like the trine from like Saturn to Mars and then Pluto, like this is like trines are a harmonious aspect in astrology, but that doesn't necessarily mean what people don't who are starting to study astrology don't necessarily understand is that it doesn't necessarily mean that it translates as something harmonious in your life. It just means there's harmonious energy that flows easily between these two planets. But that's not necessarily a healthy thing that we want, because if we have Saturn here, which is discipline, authority, hard lessons, authority figures, and then Mars, which is taking action, which can be violence, and then Pluto, which is like, or most subconscious part of ourselves can also be violence. It's like it's like there's an authority figure, or in childhood it was easy to get to violence. That's kind of what was this grand trine also tells us. So trines are not always good, okay? Which is why I was like, ooh, when I saw that. There could have been, I know that's really uh like that's never like, we do see signs here of potentially her being abused or assaulted in a sexual way during her childhood, most probably. Yeah, which is really ugly. I don't know if we know that about her or not. Um, that is very sad. That is very traumatizing, of course. And because of the trine between, Saturn and Pluto to Mars in the eighth house, I think if she struggled with substances, that's exactly why. That's exactly what she was escaping. Like that, I definitely see that as a sign of that. So, yeah, enough on that. The last two things I want to say if you see here, we have Venus conjunct Chiron. Okay, that little thing here is Chiron. It's an asteroid as well. In the ninth house, this is a very interesting placement for her to have, because with the way that she shined and the way that everybody was captivated by her and found her absolutely gorgeous, we would think that she would be confident, right? Probably not. Or if so, it is something that she had to really fight for. Okay. People with Venus conjunct Chiron. This is a challenging placement as well. People with this placement, people with Chiron Venus aspects in general, but then with the conjunction is the strongest aspect of all, and it is pretty close here, right? 2 degrees only. Here, Venus is at 28 degrees Aries and Chiron at 0 degrees Taurus. Um, this is an aspect of placement of people who typically don't like themselves or don't love themselves. And as I said, if so, it's like a very difficult road to that. It's something because Chiron in our natal charts represents our deepest wound. And Venus represents our self-esteem and our beauty. So it's like, or when you have that mixed in together with the conjunction, because that's what the conjunction does, it like takes two different energies, two different planets, and blends them together. You have like my deepest wound is my self-esteem and like the way I express love, the way I receive love, whether I think I'm worthy of that, uh, my physical appearance, that kind of thing. So yeah. And with the trine to, it's pretty wide here, but the Venus trine to Neptune as well, like she was definitely using that chameleon um uh ability of hers to make herself more acceptable. I think that with everything else in the chart considered, I think that, and that's not how every single person who has a big Neptunian energy in their chart functions, but with everything else taken into account, I really think that she was very adaptable because she was purposefully erasing or hiding herself behind that mask. And she knew that that mask was something fabulous, something that people would like, or that at least people would admire. But that's not how she felt that was who she was, genuinely, truly. And yeah. Is there anything else I want to say about that? Obviously, there's always more to say about every single thing in a chart here. This is not at all like, how do you say that? Like, this is not all me reading everything that has to be said about a chart. If you're new to astrology and you're wondering that, no, you can talk about every single chart forever, honestly. Still find new and interesting things to talk about. But I'm only talking about the things I feel guided to talk about, I want to talk about, and I wanted to mention that because I found that really interesting. The last thing I want to talk about here is this, okay? This is Pluto conjunct the North Node. We're talking about a lot of conjunctions here today, right? Pluto conjunct the North Node in Cancer. So Pluto is at 13 degrees of Cancer. The North Node is at 16 degrees, and the North Node is not a planet, of course, not an asteroid either. It's just a mathematical point. Pluto, as we said, is in the 11th house. North Node is in the 12th house because you have that line here that separates both of them. They're really both kind of like on the edge, but there's no like cusp analysis when it comes to houses. You can say it's on the cusp of the house. That doesn't mean that it has more 12th house energy. Okay. So as we said, Pluto is the most subconscious parts of ourselves. It also rules our most primal urges, and typically, which can be, I mean, the point of Pluto isn't necessarily to say whether it's good or bad, but I want to say like saying primal urges is not necessarily like something inherently destructive or healing. It can be both. Pluto can be very destructive and it can also be very healing. It speaks of deep soul transformation in our lifetime, okay? Wherever we have Pluto is where we experience the biggest transformations in our lifetime. And then conjunct the North Node. I mean, this is wild. This is really cool. The North Node is a mathematical point, as I said, that speaks of our life path and our life mission or destiny, if you believe in things like that, and our life purpose. That's what the North Node speaks of in the natal chart. And then you have those two conjunct. So her having deep soul level transformations is what she was meant to do in this lifetime, and especially transforming what it means to nurture, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be connected to your emotions, because these two are in the sign of Cancer. Isn't that fascinating, right? And at the same time, because Pluto is also a collective planet because it moves so slowly, that the sign that we have Pluto in is a generational placement. Okay, so there's many people. I don't know the exact days, but there's many people who had Pluto in Cancer. She's about halfway at the point, but there's many people within those around maybe 15 to 20 years who had Pluto in Cancer as well. What makes it unique is in what house it is placed and the aspects to other things, which is why that's what I'm talking about the most, okay? But that's why like every single generation that is born has a certain area of our society that they're meant to talk about and transform. That's what Pluto says. And for her, like, as I said, Cancer is about nurturing ourselves. It's about nurturing our family, like redefining what it means to be patriotic, redefining what it means to be proud of where we come from, of protecting our loved ones, of having a clan or having a family, of nurturing ourselves and others, and also femininity, also redefining what it means to things like motherhood and maternity. I know she never had kids, but I'm just saying in general for that generation. And because Pluto is our subconscious, it speaks in a natal chart, it speaks of our own personal subconscious and also of the collective unconscious. And because of her, because she has Pluto in the 11th house, which is the house of like collective and friends and society and our what is how you are placed in society, the role that we play in society, what kind of ideals we have for society, that kind of thing, in our communities. Like she also played a big part in her life purpose was not only to transform for herself, but also to bring to awareness for society at large things that were unconscious to us, bring it to consciousness, make us realize certain things that we believed and thought and felt without really realizing it. Okay, so that's what's really interesting, and that is also a show of a sign of like her life purpose wasn't her life purpose was not to just be pretty and feel comfortable to society. She was meant to shake a lot of things up, and she did. And she really, with this, like you and the Leo as well, which is really like when we talk about icons, we often have that Leo placement. Um, she was really, what I'm seeing as well is that she was really meant to redefine or bring something new to the conversation of what it means to be a woman in society. And that is what I want to end on. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that so cool? And she definitely did that, right? And to this day, she's an icon and an archetype, and her energy, a lot of people uh, relate to her, find her inspiring, find her interesting, find her captivating still, right? Because that is the title of this video. This is why Marilyn Monroe captivated everyone. And then you also had some other little informations about her and her life. So I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, you can let me know by giving the video a like or leaving me a comment. As I said, I want to continue making these types of videos. Obviously, they're going to be different, every single one of them, because we're going to be talking about a different person every time. That's going to change things a lot. But if you like this theme, if you like this format, if you like the way that I read astrology, if you're interested in learning more about astrology, this is the perfect space for you. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already to the channel so that you can make sure to not miss out on the next videos that I'm going to be putting out. So I already have an idea of who I want to do next, and it's going to be a very different person. Very famous as well, but not for the same kinds of things, but we'll see when we get there. For those of you who are watching who are already accustomed to my channel, yes, I will keep doing the BTS birth chart reading series, but I have decided that I only want to continue doing them when we get to their birthdays. because like I want to do like other celebrities as well. And when I think like, oh, I have to do that BTS member before I do the video about that other person, it just didn't feel right. So yes, I will keep it going, but it's gonna take some time before we get to all of the members, because I'll be doing like the depending on the birthday. So right now I have done Jimin, I have done Jin. I'm recording this like we're on December 9th. Next one I'll be recording is J-Hope in February, and you know around that time it will be posted. But I'll be doing other people in the meantime. Yeah, if you have special requests um, of people that you find interesting, that you're curious about learning their astrology, want me to analyze their birth charts, feel free to like leave me some recommendations and some requests down below. And if you want me to read your chart next, I can absolutely do that. And of course, the way I will read it will be different because you're like a living human person and you're going to be present if I like do a one-on-one consultation with you. I'm not just like talking about you to other people, so it's going to be different, of course, but my focus with astrology is really just like inner growth, self-development, that kind of thing, healing. So discovering your own potential. So if you're interested in all those kinds of things, you're curious about your own birth chart, you can book a personal session with me. There's going to be a link down below. um yeah, I also do tarot readings. I also do life coaching. So to get more details on what those services and offers entail and how to book them, there's a link down below to do that. If you want to encourage me in what I do, you can also send me a tip or a donation, and that is very appreciated. There's another link down below for that. But I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Thank you for being here, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye!